But right now we're going to dig a little deeper into this latest effort by the Government Accountability Office to tell us something we already knew, or perhaps not as much, though. I mean, they're now saying that the U.S. government has, for example, more than 100 programs dealing with surface transportation issues, 82 that monitor teacher quality, 80 for economic development, 56 for financial literacy, 17 programs for disaster preparedness, and on and on. Total cost of this duplication is about $200 billion over the next decade. And this has occasioned our next guest, John Lott, who is an economist, author of the book More Guns, Less Crime, and a frequent FoxNews.com contributor, to write about duplication and outrage. John, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. I want to go right to your final paragraph, and you say, getting rid of bureaucratic duplication is waste that should be hard to defend for anyone other than politicians who want to protect their turf. But come on, these are the guys who have the keys to the kingdom, right?
Oh, sure. Now, I'm not saying it's not understandable that they're doing it, but we've been hearing all this gnashing of teeth about how difficult it is to go and cut spending here, and yet, the question is, if you want to have a job training program, do we really need 57 of them?
Well, you do if you serve on a different committee. I mean, a lot of this,
right.
I can remember when I was a member, happened because there are, as you know, committees of jurisdiction, and they all want a piece of the action. So it's not uncommon for the Agriculture Committee to be dealing with welfare issues because they're handling food stamps, and then that slips over to Ways and Means and over to a couple of other committees, and then they need to create agencies to testify in front of the committees. Unfortunately, it's ass backwards, but that's the way it works.
Right. Well,
if you call that working, I don't, but that's
right. Well, it's nice to have a reason to go run before the TV cameras, but when an issue becomes topical. But as the GAO report was pointing out, it said you're talking about between 10 and 15 and 25% of the budget for the larger agencies, and more than that for the smaller ones, is just made up with these administrative costs that it said are duplicative. You know, if you're going to have a certain program going and doing studies for how you're going to distribute money for job training programs, you're really just reinventing the wheel over and over again. I mean, $200 billion over a decade may not be large when you're talking about $1.65 trillion loss in any one year, but it just shows if they can't even make cuts and things that are really just allowing different politicians to have publicity when issues come up, or at least to get their fingers in the pie of these things. It's really a difficult task.
All right. What do you make of this battle going on between Republicans and Democrats over the budget and this new deal essentially to kick the can down the road for a couple of weeks and cutting $4 billion?
Well, I think it's actually a fairly smart idea on the part of the Republicans that, $4 billion, I mean, the Democrats were going and claiming that $61 billion over a year was extreme.
Right.
I mean, again, it's something you go and you compare it to the size of the deficit or the size of the spending. You're talking about $61 billion is just a little bit over 1% cut in the overall spending there, and yet Democrats are arguing that this is going to somehow cause the economy to go into recession. And but it's going to be very difficult, I think, for the Democrats to go and argue that $4 billion cut when we're talking about a $1.65 trillion deficit is something that's extreme.
But do you think this is going to happen for every 2 weeks we're going to do this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, you guys are more of the politicians, right, in terms of judging those things. But at least this first round, and the Republicans got some very easy cuts, but they also got some of the more difficult cuts through in education.
As to that, if they were to do a series of short-term CRs and taking a whack of $4 billion per every 2 weeks and, working towards that goal of $61 billion, which the president says he opposes, but he signs these short-term things, it seems to me there's a political conundrum for Democrats because then they become the party of no. They're saying no to these cuts over time. They said yes this time in a pretty large majority, but at some point they're going to back off. Now, I guess my question is, at what point do those $4 billion in cuts begin to include things like entitlement, Medicare, Medicaid, even Social Security?
Well, I mean, none of them really for the $61 billion that they have. I mean, those are all in discretionary programs.
Yes, they are. But if you were a Republican, would you begin to layer in some entitlement spending because you've essentially promised your constituents, certainly the Tea Party folks have,
right,
that you were going to tackle this, which we know is 2/3 of all federal spending. Right.
Well, I think that's going to have to be in the next budgets. Right now, they're just trying to get this $61 billion, and that's the glide path that they're on right now for taking this $4 billion every two weeks. So at least that's not in the current plans. I mean, I agree. It would be nice if they're going to make larger cuts. They're going to have to go beyond these discretionary programs. But I think they look out and they see how difficult it's politically even to cut the $61 billion. Though maybe this will make it in such small bites that the Democrats will look ridiculous if they're going to fight over closing the budget, the government over $4 billion.
Yeah, that's a good point. John, thanks for coming to the show. We always appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks very much.
John LOTT, Economist, FoxNews.com.